Join me, Brother David Muhammad, every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio, Powerful Radio. Join me to hear knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Tuesdays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio.
Bringing you bold discussions, the hottest topics, and some tracks to keep you moving. The Drive Time Exchange on Net Radio, taking you above and beyond.
Anytime you bounce up a racist and you hear them running them out, it have a whole set of people don't care what they talking about. A racist is someone living happy and all their family doing well. So race talk is really not for people in the ghetto catching hell. Now tell them racists sufferers don't care about color. Sufferers don't care about race. Sufferers don't care who migrate from where or who living in who place. Sufferers don't care who from country. Sufferers don't care who from tongue. Sufferers only want to hear where the next food coming from. Get up early next morning. Go down in the 10 days yard. You'll see so much different type of people line up with the ID card. Or visit my village called Talparo, where they ain't get no water for years. People don't know the race, yes they don't know the color. With a bucket sit down shedding tears. No, tell them racist sufferers don't care about color. Sufferers don't care about race. Sufferers don't care who migrate from where or who living in who place. Sufferers don't care who from country. Sufferers don't care who from tongue. Sufferers only want to hear where the next food coming from.
All right, everybody, and of course, good afternoon to you. How are you doing? And this good-looking Tuesday afternoon, we're happy to be here with you. Of course, this is New Era TT Radio, and of course, we welcome you inside of the Drive Time Exchange with none other than Tony Fraser. So, Tony, good afternoon to you. How are you doing?
Good afternoon to you, Sir Charles. And the old man doing okay. Catching up with some young people these days. You know, go out to some news conferences and interviews and so on. And like I have grandchildren, partner. Just now they'll start calling me father and grandfather and thing, you know.
Yeah, you can't escape that, you know.
I take it and I call that George. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. So this afternoon, we want to go back to yesterday and to go back last week in terms of our panelists. I'm seeing two of them so far, Clyde Weatherhead and Denuse Demming. What happened to Dr. Bishnu Raggonath? You're there? All right. Well, we look out for him joining at some point in time.
Yeah. Dr. Raggonath is here.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you.
I see you were in your element last evening amongst some big fellas, boy, and big ladies too.
Well, boy, you have to deal with them when you have to deal with them, huh?
Right, and let me just clarify, I'm not talking about big in size, I'm talking about the big in capacity
Big in
before,
capacity.
yeah, before
One
somebody,
was an old, one was an outgoing minister, and one could be an incoming minister. We don't.
yeah. I like the lady from Tobago. She speaks her minds,
Yeah.
and I think she was on our program a couple of weeks ago talking about the tourism business in Tobago. We're talking about Donna Haddad, and she has a very practical approach to politics. Her bottom line is about service to the community and what the national community in Tobago and elsewhere can deal with this matter. All right, let me just indicate before I enter the discussion that I just came back from a news conference, two news conferences actually, hustling back from them. And two of them, the two news conferences, had to do with the chairman of the CARICOM Observer Mission and the Commonwealth Observer Mission. That's Mr. Ian Hughes of Antigua and Professor Bartolo, who is the president of the Commonwealth Observer Mission. He's from Malta. And the time was so tight, I couldn't talk to him about that island going through some serious problems with regard to climate change. Part of the island is beneath the surface now. But we talked about, and he talked about the essential element of the election, and both of them gave their full praise for the conduct of the election by the Elections and Boundaries Commission. They had no major problems. Of course, there were minor complaints here and there. Somebody don't have a poll card or something like that, but nothing of real significance. And Dr. Raggonath, they were also in full praise for the council. The council, for responsible political behavior. They had a discussion with you on the matter, and they were satisfied. Or incidentally, like the council has said, and later on in the program we can talk to Bishnu about that. What did the council feel about the conduct of the election campaign by the political parties? Let me just say, we're going to have the recording tomorrow. It's just too difficult to turn around here and get all the technical stuff right. But let me extract a few points made by the two gentlemen with regard to the chairman of the Commonwealth mission. He was very concerned about the absence of, with regard to looking at how the political parties are funded, how the campaigns are funded. And he made some very important points about denying democracy to the masses of the people when the corporations fund the political campaigns. And I've heard a figure of one of the parties, 30 million. I don't know how true it is or anything, but it's a figure that I heard. And what he was concerned about is the denial of the rights, the right that you stick your finger in the ink for. It's denying individual rights because the corporations, and as he indicated, it's not a Trinidad and Tobago phenomenon, but it's one that has been on the agenda. And I'm talking about my own experience as a reporter going back 40 years plus. I remember going to a conference in Jamaica in which the issue was talked about, and one in Grenada, the power of the dollar and the campaign financing issue. So that was his concern. The chairman of the CARICOM Commission, Observer Mission, Ian Hughes, and incidentally, both of them and most of the members of the two missions, the two teams, have been going around different parts of the Commonwealth and the world, making observations about how the elections are conducted. And Mr. Hughes made a particular point in with regard to Caribbean countries like Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have to feel, according to him, inferior in any way because the observations of teams contribute to the development of the whole capacity and the infrastructure for conducting elections. So both of them gave their absolute support, and recommendations will come at some point in time, but they were both assured that the conduct of the elections was within the required scope of freedom, and people participated freely. They both also had good words of praise for the people who conducted the EBC staff and contracted employees who were very efficient. They incidentally went to 260 something. I don't remember the plus figure, but over 200 polling stations across the country and in Tobago, of course. And those were their observations. We will get more on their voices of it tomorrow. Anything that you want to say about it, Clyde Weatherhead, Denise Demming, Bishnu Raggonath, before we move on? Yes, I think your microphone is off, Clyde. I see your mouth moving, but I'm not hearing anything. Anybody else wants to say something while Clyde fixes his microphone? Bishnu.
All I will say is simply, yes, I did meet with both teams, and I did, in fact, both teams raised the question of campaign financing with me. With the Commonwealth Mission, I observer team, I noted that one of the observers was from the Maldives and who was the head of the Transparency Institute there. So, of course, he raised the concern of campaign finance. And I told him that we've been talking about this since 2003. Unfortunately, no government has seen it fit. And then I actually had to tell them, because in fact we were meeting at the Hyatt, and I told them just upstairs of the room that I was in 2016, we had a 2-day conference talking about campaign financing and so forth, that the government, after the PNM had won the election in 2015, that they had promised in 2016, after this 2-day conference, that they would bring the legislation to Parliament. Of course, nothing ever came. So I said, governments really don't want to do this. In terms of, they did ask about how the campaigns are being funded. And I said, well, basically it's contractors and other private companies pouring money into the campaigns. And in fact, for this particular campaign, I am projecting at this point in time, I still have to work out the final details, but we close to $1 billion in terms of expenses. Because when people ask me, for instance, what does it cost to do that last day rally, the Saturday rally, I said, think about it. All of those music trucks you see are parked up in that rally, either in Eddie Hart or in Aranguez. Each one of those costs a minimum of about $8,000 to $10,000 a day, because you have to rent the truck separately, you have to rent the music equipment separately, and you have to pay the people. And so each one of those, I say, when you consider in the constituency campaigns, every day they're walking around with a music truck. What's the cost of these things? Simple things like jerseys. When you consider that political parties would have ordered in the vicinity of about 300 to 400,000 jerseys. And each one of them, the news, they did a coverage an article about 2 weeks ago, where they said the cost of a jersey, depending on the type and the material and the printing, could vary between $60 at minimum to $300. And that's the kind of, so when you consider, even if you got an average price of $100 and you talk about 300 100,000 jerseys. Think about the cost of jerseys alone, and nobody's paying for that. And of course, nobody's paying for whatever is wrapped in the jersey. I ain't going there.
And interestingly, you're going to hear his voice responding tomorrow. People who are listening tomorrow, that I asked Professor Bartolo as to how did the politicians, the leaders of the parties, react to them raising the whole issue of campaign financing. Incidentally, he used to be a politician, and so he's talking in terms of experience, and his reaction with a smile, I could see his face now, is that they're not really interested. They're not interested. And the disadvantage that the smaller parties have been put at in terms of that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about, allow them to talk, say their piece tomorrow on the program. So let's get down now to the business of reflecting on the outcome of the election. And I want to introduce Denise Demming, because Denise was the one who predicted very forcefully and with a certain amount of certainty. I don't know if she has a crystal ball somewhere in her wardrobe or something, that the UNC would win. I don't remember if she predicted a margin, but she was very certain that the UNC would win. Denise?
Tony, I didn't predict a margin. I was very clear that I thought the UNC would win, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, the UNC had a campaign that was fantastic. When you look at it from the point of view of advertising and the point of view of using a campaign to sell an idea, it was fantastic. And the first thing that stuck in my head was that song, When UNC Win. And I've been trying to get somebody to authentically tell me who sang it, and I haven't got that as yet. I've got all kinds of things. I get buff, all kinds, but that song remained in people's heads. And I know quite a lot of P&M people, and one of them said to me, Denise, I can't get this song out of my head. That When UNC Win, everybody wins, it just remains there. So I thought the campaign was excellent. The other part of the campaign that was
Denise, just before you go off the song, it impacted so much on the P&M that they did a kind of takeoff on it. When the UNC wins,
nobody
wins. Yeah, something like that. So
it
really impacted them also.
But if you have someone who understands advertising and communication, they understand that you cannot take your opponent's song and just put a negative word in it and expect that it will be that what you want will be communicated, because what people are going to hear is what they've originally heard from the song. And you just putting a negative word will not change that. So when they did that, I sat and said, well, what is wrong with these people? Well, whatever was wrong. But with regard to that, that was really amazing. And I have not heard a P&M version of anything else that is equally amazing. What I've actually heard is a lot of the P&M songs, I thought, and this is just my assumption, I thought it was the same voice that sang different things over the last 15 years. So I'm sure that I heard the same voice in 2015. I'm sure I heard the same voice in 2020. So it's again, when you think through that in terms of advertising and communication, what people are hearing is your past. They're not hearing anything that makes them feel excited. So the music was excellent. And then by the end of the campaign, you had so many musicians taking their songs and putting UNC words in it. Now, of course, they were paid, so that's why they did it. But the point is that if you were whining for a song for Carnival and then you suddenly hear it at a UNC campaign, you suddenly feel good. Or if you hear it on social media, you suddenly want to go with it. So in terms of the advertising campaign, I think the advertising campaign just demonstrated how well it was. The second aspect of the advertising campaign that I thought was brilliant was that in the Express, at the bottom of, I think, the front page and a couple of the pages, they had an ad across the bottom of of the pages. And those ads, for some people who I have spoken to, they say to me the content wasn't the issue, All I saw was yellow and UNC. So they weren't too interested in the content. And again, when we talk about advertising, people don't go through reading a whole lot. What they want is what is popping out of it. So I thought the UNC campaign was absolutely fabulous, and that is that's the main reason why I thought that they would win. My other reasons for thinking they would win were that in the 9.5 to 10 years of PNC of PNM, you see a confusion between UNC and PNC. I mean, of PNM leadership.
You're talking, Denise, you seem to be talking about a coalition between the PNM and the UNC.
And Tony, I am very committed in my head that we need a coalition to sort out crime. But let me not go there as yet and go back to some of the issues over the last 9 years have just been recurrent, and we saw no changes from those issues. And to me, our biggest problem, there are two things to me that are major problems. One is the crime, and the second problem is education. And the education has not transformed. And unless we transform the education, the future is not going to change very much. And then they've done nothing about, as far as I'm concerned, they've done nothing about crime. They've had a horrible crime minister of national security who has done very little. And, so that unless we sort out crime, we're not going to go anywhere. And just a third thing I want to say is that there's something I do, and I started doing it as just a little fun thing while running, and I will say what I thought while running. And I did a while running a week ago, congratulating whoever was the winner. I didn't say who would be the winner, but congratulating the winner of the election and asking that the first thing they should do is have a coalition between the winner and whoever is the opposition in order to come up with a strategy. That's my dog that's barking. We'll get rid of it just now. Not get rid of, we'll move the dog. So the coalition, I felt that we need a coalition between the opposition and whoever is a party in power to deal with crime. If you don't do that, then you will always have people saying, no, that's not going to work, that's not going to work. But the coalition, it will be tremendous if that happens. It will also communicate to our people that coming together on things will make a difference. There are a number of things that you cannot solve by yourself. But if you come together, if you collaborate, you would make a difference. So that's my thought on that.
That's Denise Demming commenting and talking about why she predicted last, when was it? Thursday, last Thursday, that the UNC would win the election. Just quickly before I go on, did you perceive that the margin would be so significant? I just heard something just now, which must be close to the final result. What's it? 27-11-2. Is the mark correct there?
28-11-2.
Wow.
Okay. Did you think about or did you perceive that the margin would be so wide?
No, I did not, because I did not feel the NAR energy in this time, and the NAR energy was 33.3.
Yeah.
So when I thought about it, I thought it would just be marginal. It would be just, and I thought they would have to now collaborate because they wouldn't have anybody with lots of parties winning, of constituencies winning. So I did not see such a large. As a matter of fact, my thought were that there were two constituencies that would have made a difference. One would have been the Tunapuna Regional Corporate, Tunapuna area, that Piako Tunapuna constituency. And the other constituency that I thought would make a difference would have been the San Fernando West constituency, which is the one with Faris Alwari.
Yeah.
I thought that those two constituencies would make a difference and would go to the UNC. And I thought that because I went to both constituencies, because I do that, I love politics. So I went to both constituencies, and the sense I was getting in both constituencies was that people were going to move away. So I thought it would be two. And then I did not anticipate that Tobago, both constituencies in Tobago would move away. I thought one would, but not both. So I have been surprised by the extent of this cocktail that the PNM has got.
Like your word, Denise, curtail. You might be tempted to use another one, another
No, no, no. I won't
the
use the cut
anatomy with an A, but we will leave
No.
it at that for the point in time. Clyde, went ahead.
Yes, yes, Tony.
Yeah, yeah. Are you
Um,
surprised by the victory and the extent of the victory?
I am not surprised by the victory. The extent I am a bit surprised by. Um, last week I said I wasn't too sure. I wasn't prepared to make a prediction. Um, simply because I could see that there was a shift taking place, but I wasn't sure to what extent. Um, Saturday night, I sat down and I watched Stuart Young present his long tirade. He came with a whole printed bound document to read out to his rally. And he spoke after his political leader this time. And I looked at him and I saw what they were showing among the crowd. And people were very restless, children talking to their mother, people leaving the rally, things like that. And I posted that very night that I just saw Stuart Young commit a cardinal sin for a public speaker. He lost his audience, and he quite possibly lost an election that night. Or at the very least, he was very concerned that they were about to lose the election. And that is exactly what happened.
Yeah. Clyde, just before you go on that point that you made there, that he was convinced they would lose. On election day, on election morning, I went down trying to play young reporter again, going to talk to politicians on
We saw that. We saw that. You put your phone in man's face.
And I asked him a question about the campaign and how he felt about it. And there were a few words that he used which struck me. And I checked with another reporter if he had heard it. And the words, I don't remember verbatim, but it was to the effect that he has done his best. And what he didn't say, well, I do my best, but if we get blows, you can't blame me for that. It was, he didn't use those words, but he certainly used, I have done my best. And I got a sense from that they weren't as confident as I thought they should have been or could have been. And that is that every politician on the stump must sound like if he's going to win all the seats. And that stuck in my mind that something was brewing there that they were aware of.
Well, actually, it was brewing before that, because when the Women's League had a meeting in St. James, the nastiness that those women carried on that night against Kamala Prasad Bisesa, it was just a sign of, boy, we going all out because they say they're all in, which is a gambler's term. And they choose the right term, all in, a gambler, he put all the chips there and he said, let me put this on the bet there now, right? And that meeting to me was the most disgusting thing. I put a post on Facebook the next morning that my MP, Camille Robinson Regis, got up there and talking about Kamala and she against democracy and this, she's a threat to what crap, and talking about the woman's physical condition in a kind of way that, I mean, I would expect that from them dotish men, but from women to be doing that. And then this lady who went up in St. Augustine was a minister in the Ministry of Legal Affairs. She learned to talk a mile a minute. They made her a MC star of the PNM. And she just went on and on and on, ranting and raving and saying nothing. So that from that night, the campaign of the PNM took a turn where they literally became desperate. Then Marvin Gonzalez, himself an ex-policeman and a legal officer, an attorney at law, now the Minister of National Security, comes to the papers and says, well, the US is telling us they're interested in certain candidates, and if they win, they wouldn't work with them. And what kind of crap is that? So he got into the conspiracy theory nonsense, like some of them, and then the whole campaign just went downhill from there. And it reminded me that rally reminded me of the COP closing rally in 2007, where they brought Naipaul's sister to do a speech, and actually a couple of candidates got up and walked off the stage. It was so bad, but this was the worst I've seen the PNM in a long time. Stuart Young made up a manifesto on the platform every night. I spoke to the Minister of Finance and he gave me the figures. I spoke to this minister and we come up with this policy. And that's they were so unprepared for the election that they said they were most prepared for. And I'm just seeing how they call it these days. It's not a tweet. It's whatever on X or whatever it is. Marco Rubio is saying, congratulations to Kamala Prasad Bissessar on her election as the next PM of Trinidad and Tobago. She's a strong leader, friend, and an U.S. ally who shares at POTUS's priorities on security and immigration. We look forward to building a close partnership for the future of Trinidad and Tobago and the entire Caribbean.
Well, she has been talking in confident terms and tones about the possibilities with regard to cooperating with the Trump government. So maybe there are some connections being struck there. But, on that same thing, talking about the women, something that Kamala Prasad Bissessar said on was it her acceptance speech, well, not acceptance, but her declaration of victory, or some other time, she said something about the pain that she has suffered over the years because of the bricks and brats, she didn't use that term, that have been hurled at her. And I don't normally feel sorry for politicians because they give as well as they get. And I really don't feel sorry for woman, man, child. They're all the same. I really have no sympathy for them. But it struck me that she clearly has medical problems and so on, that she must have, in a way, she was saying that because she has started talking about her frailty. First time I've heard her talk about it. In a way, she was saying that how I am, it's because of what I have got. And of course, my cynicism would turn immediately on what you gave to. But in a moment of, I don't know, that you feel that politicians who have developed the political culture about screaming and shouting and making all kinds of wild allegations against each other, that there is something coming through that we need to pay attention to. But that's just my moment of sympathy. It went very quickly thereafter.
Well, the other thing is, too, Tony, that the UNC conducted their second campaign more intensely towards the end, and even on polling day.
Yeah.
I mean, they wrote the EBC a letter the day before election saying, well, you did this in a polling station in 2015, and you did that in a polling station in 2020, and we expect you will do this again and try and fix yourself before tomorrow. I mean, what nonsense.
Yeah.
And you then during the day, they up and down the place with 190 lawyers, according to Kamala, looking for something to go to court with in case they lose.
Yeah.
Which is
Clyde, I experienced that. I experienced some of your colleagues because on the morning of the election, I traversed areas along the East-West corridor and ended up in St. Joseph, the big tree in the St. Joseph Park, which is lit up at Christmas time and so on. And the two parties, the NTA wasn't there, the PNM, and on the other side was the UNC, and there were 4 lawyers sitting there waiting. And I asked one of them to talk to me. They said, no, boy, Fraser, if you go and tell you that they have no problems now, and then a problem come up, you go say, we lying. So that the lawyer, that also was part of what Denise talked about, their readiness for the battle. So they had 4 lawyers there ready, and of course St. Joseph was one of the most marginal of constituencies around West St. Joseph, that is. And
Well, that was a branch office, because I know from the 2015 election, I was dealing with some constituencies up in the east here, and the UNC had a batch of them in a building in Takarigo here.
Yeah.
And then they have a main office with another batch of bigger senior people. But Darrell, what's his name? Alaha?
Alaha, yeah.
He has taken this election to make himself into a figure in the legal profession, because he spoke such a wad of nonsense when they met with the EBC and with the CARICOM observers. I couldn't believe it, that somebody who is acquainted with the Representation of the People Act and who is a legal person could speak about those things as though, I mean, we have no confidence in the EBC, so why are you in the election then? And then you come at the end. So after last night, I'm not hearing a thing from the EBC, the UNC about the EBC. Yeah. In fact, Kirk Mayhew was on one television station, and he also admitted,
looking very smug with himself.
Yes, yes.
When it was clear.
Yeah, and in clear contradiction to Heinz, who was also on the panel.
Definitely.
And he admitted last night that there is no ideological difference between the PNM and the UNC on any fundamental question. That is just a matter of how we tactically say this on some issue, and that is it. So we have 2 parties that are the same fundamentally in terms of their outlook, and there is no difference. My sadness about this election is that since 2019, at the invitation of Nalini Dial and 1 or 2 very small parties, I wrote to all the parties other than the PNM and the UNC a simple letter at the time of the local government election, asking them to come and let us speak about how they could work together for the election. And the COP at that time, led by Sipasad Bechan, did not respond. Ms. Pandey refused to respond. Mr. Alexander told me, I out here doing all the work, I ain't going to talk to them. And Mr. David Abdullah said, the MSJ is the future, so I ain't talking to them. And they all refused to talk. Then a few weeks later, Pandey called them to a meeting, and within 2 weeks, they all went asunder all over the place. The fact is that if you face these 2 parties that are monopolizing the politics and have no fundamental difference, the third parties, by doing what they did in this election, 17 parties in this election, 9 candidates in one constituency in Tobago, and 5 in the other one, what they have done is created a situation where nobody would want to hear a third party. The fact is, as I said to them since 2019, unless you form a united front against the PNM and the UNC, you will make no headway in the politics. And this is where we have ended up.
All right. So your sort of concluding comment as to, you said that you were surprised by the margin, the width of the margin, but your concluding comment on why you thought. Denise talked about the advertising campaign and generally the campaign, politicking, etc., etc. Why do you think they won?
Hubris.
What do you mean by that?
Keith Rowley convinced himself that this notion that the PNM has somewhere in the back of their head, that God put them on the earth in Trinidad and Tobago to be able to rule, and that is their rule. When he defeated Manning, when he got him out of the party, he increasingly convinced himself that he was the sole person who could save Trinidad and Tobago, that he was some kind of savior and some anointed one. And he acted that way, and he got worse and worse and worse with it.
Yeah.
To the point that the defeat in the THA election in Tobago was because of what he did to Kelvin Charles. That got a lot of people, PNM people in Tobago, very vexed. And then what he did with Stuart Young on this rounds got PNM people more vexed all over the country. And also what he did by giving himself this nice fat salary and big $1 million a year
Back pay.
pension and back pay, while you telling people, hey, hold 4%, hold 4, you know, and not just hold it, they imposed it because they sent the negotiations to the special tribunal and to the industrial court. So that those things that he did, and he sold us this notion that here and I have the solution to our economic problems. Venezuelan gas is gas or nothing. Literally, Keith Rowley must take full and sole blame for where the PNM is at this point in time.
Right.
And by the way, his anointed one is not a political figure. He's not a politician. He might be a good lawyer, but he's not a good politician.
So, we could come around to defining what's a politician and what's politics, but for another point in time, we do that. Incidentally, I have a notion that I have no grounds, no basis for it, more than suspicion, that I think that the date of the election was foisted on Young because Dr. Rowley wanted to rid himself of all of the responsibility. But I had to be careful. He might sue me for saying that. And I had no money to pay him, so that...
Tony, can I?
Sure.
I just want to comment, Tony. I want to comment a little on what Clyde is saying. And I want to remind Clyde that in 2015, Dr. Rowley led an excellent team to win the elections. And I think that he was still there, that at 2015, this is what he did, and they performed very well. And I can say that because at that time I was part of the communications team. But this time they've not done the things that the communications team participated in. And one of the reasons I wrote an article about the Bournes Road meeting was that Shamfa Kajo did a speech which 9 years ago got 60,000 views. Now, in today's...
I remember it very well.
Huh?
I remember the speech very well.
Yes.
I saw her on the platform at Bournes Road, and she was dynamite.
She was dynamite, and she was dynamite. I was her coach, and I have no problem telling people that. And then a couple of weeks later at Eddie Hart Ground, she did a similar speech, and that had another 60-something thousand views. So you had that time, what you had was a well-organized set of presenters. And I mean, people like Faris presented and presented extremely well. At that time, Dr. Rowley presented well. So, but what caused them to present well was that...
But Erica was at that meeting, was she?
Who's this?
Erica Williams, was she? Cornell?
Erica Williams, not on the platform, but she was there.
She was there, I remember.
She was there at the meeting.
Yeah.
And what
Glenda Marine came out from behind a shadow, and I was shocked. My good friend, but that's another story.
What I see as the big difference is that the 2015 had a strategic team that worked professionally. I'm not seeing evidence of a strategic team working professionally since then. Yeah. You know, when you see the things you're seeing now. So for example, last night when I listened to Stuart Young and Dr. Rowley talking about where the PNM is and so on, I said to myself, there's no way they prepared those speeches. Those speeches just came from their head. And for a politician, you have to prepare your speech. I'm not saying you have to learn it, but you have to be very clear on what are the key messages, what are we going to say, how are we going to say it, when I'm finished here, what do I want people to take away? And last night, I didn't get that.
And I'm sure, Denise, I looked at the body reaction between Dr. Rowley and Stuart Young, and I was quite amused by it actually. Stuart was willing and eager to get some space and kind of push him aside, but he wasn't going anywhere. But that's another story. Again, to courthouse closed and nobody.
The thing is,
represent
Denise.
me pro bono, right?
The thing is, Denise, that contrasting those two things, that 2015 and now, when Shamfos Kojo spoke at Eddie Hart, I looked at it on TV, and the woman was bouncing. You know, when a speaker is really in the stride, they actually bounce.
Yes.
She was like that. But this whole campaign, I listened to her in Tobago last week, and she was just ranting and raving and carrying on. And then to make things worse, on the day of the SEA, she is attacking the THA for what? That one person tell her it didn't have a clock for somebody to election an exam. And she did, as an MP, you didn't think I should call the Division of Education. You're going on Facebook with your nonsense. So, and the other thing is that Dr. Rowley last night, he said, the PNM is strong, but we will rebuild it.
But
maybe Shamfa's marriage has something. Let me
my
careful. Let me go to Bishnu before I get myself in trouble here. Dr. Bishnu Raggonath. I knew Derek pronounced on the outcome, and his view was that there would be a one-seat victory for the PNM. And Dr. Bishnu Raggonath didn't disagree with him terribly. In fact, he went down a little bit with him. Did you change your mind after that, Bishnu?
To some extent, I did. In fact, but I still, in fact, until yesterday morning, some people called me, UNC people called me, and I say, you know, UNC, when UNC wins, everybody wins. Well, my idea here is not everybody, when UNC wins. I stick it with the other part. So I said 2021. But as to that, I was just telling them that yesterday. But in the case of Denise and Clyde, to some extent, by last Friday or Saturday, the indications I had gotten was simply that the UNC was able to, would clearly take St. Joseph. The Shiguanas East was safe for the UNC, and they were also safe in Moruga Tabland. And literally, they were going to be fighting for a seat, either San Fernando West, La Joqueta Talparo, or Tunapuna, or Topo. And basically, they were looking at just getting one to take them across to the 21. By yesterday morning, several things happened, and in fact, if I may react to some of the things Denise said and what Clyde said, let me start with the latest one, Rubio. Was the connection between Rubio and the POTUS and the UNC? Wasn't Alexander's brother the doctor who was advising Trump and them in COVID time?
Well, not only COVID time. Alexander boasts that he's part of Trump's administration.
So there's some connection there between Alexander's brother and the US Trump administration. I just say that. As to the campaign, one of the things, or two other things I noticed as we went along the campaign. In this campaign, the PNM was reactive to the UNC. The UNC would come up one day and say something, and as Clyde said, Stuart Young was making up the manifesto as he go along, and his making up was reacting to UNC. So one night UNC said, we're going to send free doctors. The next night Stuart Young come and say, well, no, we'll give them doctors online and whatever else. And that's the reaction kind of aspect of the the campaign that we saw happening with the PNM. They were on the back foot from the beginning. They were not as ready as we thought they were. And when they used the campaign slogan, all in, to me, that was really trying to convince their membership that we should all be in behind a Stuart Young. But clearly that did not happen. And basically, when I looked at the results, last night as the results was coming in, and then last night after the television program, when I came home and I looked at Foster Cummins and Faris Alwari commentary, and they made it quite clear that in both La Joqueta Del Paro and in San Fernando West, key polling divisions, which were traditionally die-hard PNM polling divisions, people did not come out to vote. Before I even got home, though, when we were in the studio and we were looking at the results, the first of the results came from Tobago. And I'm looking at my data that I had there before, and I said, well, wait a minute. In 2020, in COVID, in the midst of COVID, we had 13,000 people voting in each one of those constituencies. How come this year around, we can't meet 9,000? When you add both TPP and PNM, it's not yet 9,000. What has happened? Why have there been this great falling off? And when I came home and I heard Faris and Foster, I said, okay, so that explains it. The PNM people decided they were going to punish their leadership for disrespecting them when Rowley imposed Stuart Young on the party. And clearly, when you look at the throughout, I mean, I looked at some figures. Ford here in Tunapuna dropped about 3,000 votes. When you look at these kinds of drops, it has to be that people in the PNM said, well, look, if you want to disrespect us, we will show you that we are in charge of this. This is our party. This is not your party to decide who you're handing it to and so on. And that, I think, is one of the things that would have played a big part in what happened in all those constituencies. Because along the East-West corridor, you look at it, and the voter turnout for the PNM has been significantly reduced.
Yeah.
And the question is,
do you have any sense of I know it can't be anything approaching final figures, but do you have any sense at all of the figures? No,
we don't.
Overall, right. Yeah, that's an important point.
And that, I think, is because you see, I keep, in fact, this morning I had to do several programs, and everybody keep asking the same question, and I keep telling them, I said, Rowley has to take full blame for this PNM defeat. He cannot pass it off and say Stuart Young was the prime minister and Stuart Young called the date and whatever else. I am not buying into that. The mere fact that he was holding Stuart Young's hand throughout the campaign as political leader tells me that he has to take his responsibility and his blame, because
I don't know if you noticed last night, he kind of halfway took responsibility, but ducked back out of it quite quickly. Yeah.
Right?
So this is not my forum to express my view. And I buy what you are saying, and also what Denise has said about the campaign and so on. But I am coming to the point that the UNC, the PNM lost the election, and but that's a whole new story.
No, but that has been my point in all our elections in Trinidad. No party wins an election,
Yeah.
Always in government loses it.
And what is happening, and what I am exploring for my column is that it has been happening since 1986, that the electors are not convinced about the capacity of the political parties and the politicians to solve their problems. And therefore, they have, according to Deeply, they are voting them out of office. For all of the things that we talked about, the crime, the economy, their inability, and a critical thing, the constitutional matter. But I'm sure Clyde will talk about that at some point.
One other factor, Tony, and Denise mentioned it, that in 2015, she was coaching the PNM candidates and so on in how they presented. This time around, and I have to talk about campaigning and the campaign strategy. When I saw last week, I think probably it was Wednesday night or Tuesday night, that Sadiq Bash and Ken Emmerich was back on a UNC platform in San Fernando West.
Oh, he was? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when I saw both of them there, I said, well, wait a minute. This is the 2010 team that the UNC had used to strategize to put them in power in 2010. And they were back on the platform. But during the course of the campaign, 2 or 3 things came up that I saw. The night John Jeremy went on the UNC platform, the first night, as John Jeremy was speaking, somebody sent me, WhatsApp to me, here's John Jeremy speaking notes. So I said, well, wait a minute now. And literally what he was saying was coming straight out of this thing. On several occasions since then, every speaker on a UNC platform was given a script. Macamillan in San Fernando West, that same night with Sadiq Bash and Emmerich, I was looking at it on the television, was making his presentation. And he said, you all will have to excuse me, I am going off script because I want to talk about one other thing. So clearly the UNC, whoever was managing their thing, made sure that all their speakers were well scripted and they knew what they were presenting. Unlike the PNM, who go on a platform, well, we have the experience, let me go and rant and rave and hopefully people will believe us. And that was a major difference to me as to this time around in the UNC campaigning as opposed to the PM.
Freewheeling is good, but you had to be good at it also. So we are talking this afternoon or reflecting on the election results of last night. Dramatic and surprising to many, including myself. I didn't think that the campaign generally, I'm not talking about the UNC or the PNM campaign, reached anything close to 86 in 2010, but it was nevertheless powerful. So we are talking about that. We have Dr. Bishnu Raggonath, who is also involved, the chairman of the Council for Responsible Political Behavior, and we're going to quiz him on that in a moment. We have Clyde Weatherhead, lawyer, politician, trade unionist, coach of politicians, as he revealed sometime in the program this afternoon. And Denise Demming, who herself was a coach, and she told us about that. Incidentally, Denise, Shamfa has lost something. I don't know what it is, but I remember that Bones Road meeting. She had a phrase which doesn't come to my mind. Maybe you gave it to her so you could remind her that she was pounding away all the time at that meeting and during that campaign. I remember Dr. Rowley looking at her and saying to himself, what was if my daughter, in whom I am very well pleased, because she really ruptured on the political campaigns end. She seems to have lost it, Denise.
She has lost it. She lost it immediately after she went into power. What is coming back to my mind is her talking about bun them.
Bun them, yeah, that was the phrase that she was using. Aka Stalin. Yeah,
Yes, it was quoting Stalin and using that one them phrase.
she played herself well. So we are talking about the results of the election, and clearly everybody is surprised. I was quite surprised by it myself, the extent of the victory by the UNC. And as I said, I'm going to talk about that at some point in time. And I'm not saying that the campaign wasn't good. I'm not saying that it influenced, but I think the PNM, like the UNC, and I remember, I'm sure that Bishnu will, being on a panel at UE post the 2015 election when the UNC lost, the People's Partnership lost. And my view was that, or when the PNM won the first time, and my view was that the People's Partnership really lost it. They fractured in office terribly, as the UNC has fractured. Remember the Basdeo Pandey and the Ramesh Maharaj and the other Maharaj and Trevor Sudama, etc. And it's that kind of pattern of behavior that I'm talking about. So we're talking about what happened on the night, and if you have a view that you want to enjoin the discussion with, then feel free so to do. Chalo, you there?
Yeah, I'm right here, Tony. I'm right here.
Give me a little calypso to break the chat, pure chat now. Give me a little piece of kaiso then. I'm sure you have something there that we had a program, incidentally. If you were listening to the best radio station in town, you would have heard it. But we had a campaign, a program a few weeks ago with Zeno Constance, looking at, he made a selection of the 20 top election calypsos of going back, incidentally, to 1925. Calypsos and Calypsonians getting involved. Of course, the nature of the involvement was very different to today, when the Calypsonians, and I'm not knocking Calypsonians, when they put some dollars in their pocket, I'm glad for them. The difference, of course, with the likes of Stalin and Valentino, it came from their own ideological and political beliefs. Today it comes from their bank account belief. And who am I to knock the Calypsonians for making some dollars out of their talents? Chalo, you have one there to break the chat a little bit?
I think this might be an app we wanted to actually play at this point in time.
Location 7 miles off the coast of Venezuela. SOS, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Help! Help! The Trinidad, a luxury liner, sailing the Caribbean Sea with an old captain named Eric Williams. For years, sailed smooth and free, but sadly Eric Williams passed away. The ship hit rough water that day. Someone turned the bridge over to a captain named Chambers. Me blood crawl, things start to fall. Hold me head when I sail a ball. Captain, the ship is sinking. Captain, the seas are rough. Oh yes, we gas tank almost empty, no electricity. We oil pressure reading low. Shall we abandon ship, or shall we stay on it and perish slow? We don't know, we don't know. Captain, you tell me what to do. Whoa, whoa. The Trinidad, oh, she was a beauty with wealth that few surpassed. And in her day she sailed majestically. There were few in her class. Faithfully she fulfilled her sailor's need. Some Some were overpowered by greed, and so they pilfered slow. Some took by bulk and go. Now she looked dull, she's at a lull. She could barely sit on her hull. Captain, the ship is sinking. Captain, the seas are rough, oh yes. We gas tank almost empty, no electricity. We oil pressure reading low. Shall we abandon ship, or shall we stay on it and perish slow? We don't know, we don't know. Captain, you tell me what to do. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
All right, that's Gypsy, the sinking ship. I don't think I've heard Gypsy actually sang that song live for a long, long time.
Yeah. And I remember the 1986 campaign like if it were yesterday. The most brilliant campaign that I experienced covering political parties and elections, and I've been covering a few of them quite well, go back to 1976, 1977, a little bit in 1971, but fully in 1976. It would set the campaign meeting ablaze when it was played, and people went mad. I tell you of an experience I had. I covered an NAR meeting down in Glencoe, in that little square before you go up the mountain, and you can imagine the crowd, and the song played. Margaret Hector, remember her? Baptist woman, was on stage, and some catching power and so on. And I see some residents, women of the area, catching power. I say, but what kind of madness is this going on here? The feeling, the sense of movement and so on was spread wide, and it devastated the PNM. And when I reflect on that, that is why I said that nothing like that happened in this campaign, but nevertheless, it was good enough to put UNC in front. Let me,
Tony, just before you go on, if I may, I would just like to put something to the panel.
Sure.
In between here, two things of sort. One is that the United National Congress coming back into office now for a second time, a second term, a second chance, call it whatever you want to call it. Would have made significant mistakes and things that that kept them and put them out of office in between 2010 and 2015. I would like to know if you all feel that they have learned anything from that, and what would you all expect going forward from this government?
Very critical question. In fact, it's the leading to the subject I'm talking here about coalition. But folks, respond to Sir Charles and his concern and his perceiving into the future.
Well, Tony, I was in the belly of the beast in Henare. I was an advisor to a minister. And
confession is good for the soul sometimes, right?
I don't hide the fact that I was there, but I could let people know that when I spoke about the extent of contract employment I found in the public service in the ministry where I was told, you can't write that in the papers. as if I cannot deal with things I am seeing that I think are wrong. Having been the president of the PSA, I couldn't countenance that. The fact is that by 2013, the UNC, by its machinations within the coalition, had prevented any structuring of the coalition. And from the negotiations of which I was part of the team, on the very first night, we made it clear to Mr. Dukaran that all the UNC wanted was to make sure they have 21 seats. So that this was not really a coalition, this was a UNC plus, which is, they are repeating now. Because the seats
and Clyde, I think there is even less substance to it, because
of course
the COP had substance and had a say in the matter, seats and so on. Dukaran won Tunupuna, right? I don't.
COP had 5 seats in the cabinet.
I don't call this a coalition. I think about it as an association of some politicians.
Yes,
But
it's
you go
UNC
ahead.
plus because this is what they've been doing since 2007. 2007 they were UNCA with KDs, and KDs left even before the election. 2010 we were in PP, and then 2015 they tried to get another coalition kind of thing, but they didn't get much. And right now, this is just another UNC pretending to be more than the UNC.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that from that standpoint that they have learned anything.
Yeah.
In respect, like I said, by 2013, they had lost the population.
Yeah.
The allegations were there, and all kinds of things were happening, and then Section 34 came, and that just crowned it off.
Yeah. And the point is that this time around, and we are talking about the going into Sir Charles' question about the coalition and what they will do and so on, the UNC has even less reason and responsibility to react positively to its partners, its associates, because as you indicated, whereas the COP 5 seats, you said, I don't remember the number, 5 seats, then these fellas can't claim a quarter of a seat anywhere on their own. That is.
And that was strategically done, except that the two OWTU and CWU candidates in the Southwest Peninsula probably won those 2 seats.
Yeah.
But they have no political party.
Yeah.
There are 2 union, one ex and one union officer, and no union can say that their membership will support a particular party or a particular candidate in any election. I don't care what they say.
Yeah.
The fact is that that does not happen.
And they can't claim any credit for having assisted in the winning of a seat or winning a seat outright.
Yeah. And the point Bishnu raised just now about when he saw Bakshande, I could tell you that in 2007, between 6 and 7, within the COP, there was so much internal discussion on issues. And then in holding meetings, there was structure, there was everybody had talking points, there were policy documents that people were familiar with. So I remember one night we had a meeting at City Hall in Port of Spain. And well, as usual, they put about 5, 6 people on the platform, which I always tell them was too much. But that night, even without a clear theme of the meeting, when everybody spoke, the meeting just flowed from one to the next without the usual scripting and preparation, because it became a habit. What the UNC has done is to get back Bakshande with them, because for the last 2 elections they were not there.
Yeah.
And that may account, because I myself was looking at it and trying to figure out how come the UNC campaign is so structured. And I can't say that Mayhew would do that, because he's just a propagandist. I don't think he's an organizer. So.
And Jack must have made a contribution also.
Of course.
Yeah. And just to talk about Sadiq Bashk, I experienced the man firsthand. He's a deadly politician, you know. I was head of news at TGT then. Jones Madeira had developed the system of having, you know, panels of discussion at political meetings and so on. And Sadiq came, and I tried to enforce that, and Sadiq got to the advertisers and the management of the station, and they say, Fraser, what stupidness you talking about independent journalism and all of that? Dollars coming into the company because of that, and Sadiq was the man behind it. But he became my friend in a certain kind of way. Denise Demming, the coalition, Sir Charles raised the issue of the coalition holding together. And Clyde and myself were just talking about, you know, the substance and the responsibilities that the UNC had to its coalition members in 2010 simply does not exist now.
I think it does not exist, but I'm an optimistic person. And I feel that the only strategy we can employ at the moment is a collaborative one, and to have some coalition with all kinds of people in order to come up with solutions. Because we are not dealing with the 18 to 20,000 young people who join the adult population annually. So their attitude is not going to be one of, I'm voting because my parents voted for whoever. They're looking at where can they go, what do they need to do. And if we are going to cope with those or even give anything that's worthwhile to those, I mean, think of it, 18,000 young people join every year. Then we can't take the same strategies. We have to transform what we're doing into something else that brings them in and provides them with opportunities. And you cannot do that if you ignore everybody and you keep being, well, this is what we used to do. Now, there's another side of it that I think will cause transformation, and that is the frailty of the upcoming prime minister. I think her frailty.
The designate.
The designate. That will transform the way people do things, because they now have to do things with a different view of who the leader is. So to me, those two things, the youth that we have to treat with, and the fact that our prime minister designate is in a difficult situation, that should help us transform our strategies, our actions, our mission. If we don't do those kinds of things, then it's going to get worse. But I am optimistic that it is going to get better. It has to get better.
Dr. Raggonath, your colleague on the panel raised a very interesting thing, a certain amount of spirituality and soul. Perhaps when you're facing difficult health circumstances, something works in your mind. Let me ask you, Dr. Raggonath, if you are expectant that the attempts in the past of coalition politics, and as I made the point earlier, coalition politics of the past, which had quite a lot of substance to it, as opposed to what is happening now. Are you persuaded, and again, this is Sir Charles' question, that the coalition will hold together in the circumstances?
I am not persuaded that there's a coalition in the first place. So let me just start there. What do we have? What is a coalition? COP fighting 2 seats in Portsmouth, which they knew they could never have won. Philip Alexander and the PEP fighting seats or taking on seats that they know that they're not going to bring home. Notice OWTU did not put themselves forward except through Keza. But the point about it is simply, here's one where we could ask the question, is it really going to be simply, all right, so we have Philip there. We don't need the pep, just give Philip something and keep him quiet.
Is that possible to keep Philip quiet?
Well,
go ahead, only provoking.
Yeah, no. But the point about it, yeah, you can keep him quiet, once he gets something that keep him busy. And you give Mr. Roger some ministerial portfolio. I expect that he will get some ministerial portfolio, or an independent senator position. And that, sorry, not independent, a UNC senator position. But once you give both of them positions, well, I'm not even sure whether, I expect that Prakash Ramarao might get a senatorial position. So you give the three of them who are supposed to be the coalition partners. I think the other person who might get something too as a coalition partner would be the PSA president, because they used her well. And in fact, she spoke. But the point about it is that as far as these are individuals, and I'm not sure they are bringing in a party or anything else beyond that. So that is one of the things that I see happening. As to whether they have learned any lessons, I would say no, because you're talking about a whole new different batch of people from the ones of 2010, 2015. Yes, they will have one or two of them who will probably come back in. But you're talking about a whole new batch of people on the job trainees, some of them will be, as ministers. I mean, anybody could see, let me not go there, but I was going to ask whether Roger Alexander could be a good minister. But I mean, clearly it is one of those things.
There's a lot of ambition there, Bishnu.
Exactly, right? So you see, that's where the problem comes in. Now, the difference with this type of victory, and in fact, I said it last night, the difference with this victory of this 27, 28, if that is what it is, the UNC, I would have thought that they were going to be building a coalition with the TPP in Tobago. But clearly, with the majority that they have now, they don't need the TPP to get a 2/3 majority. To get it, and even if they get the 2 additional seats with the TPP, that will not give them the 3/4 majority if they need to amend the constitution. So they'll be 1 seat short, at least 1 seat short. So they have already have the simple majority. They already have a 2/3 majority in the lower house. And literally, I don't think anybody or any one of those the 2 union representatives would give up their position easily if push comes to shove, and there's any breakup in the so-called coalition. So the point about it here is that this is a UNC government. End of story. They're going to see themselves as a UNC party win. Yes, we have 2 union reps, and if we put some others in the Senate, but that's as far as it goes. As to whether or not they would have learned anything, I doubt very much so, and whether it will be much different to what we would have seen 2010 to 2015, we'll really have to wait and see.
What of the issue of Kamala Prasad-Bissessar reaching this point in her life and career, and obviously, well, she should be thinking about, how is she going to leave some kind of mark on the political scene beyond, the Kamala Queen business that happened in 2010. Is she likely to be a little bit more, I wanted to use the word humble, but politicians, they don't know about that really when they're in office. But is she likely to be more human, more humane, more female, if you like, the kind of, she cultivates this thing about, she's a mother and she's a grandmother and she loves people so much and so on. Is all of that likely to impact this time on her with regard to her leadership of the association?
I would think that this time around, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, noting her frailties and her health and physical health condition, I would think that she'd probably be handing power to other people within the party to make decisions. Yes, everything will come under her as head of the cabinet and so on, but I would think that she will not necessarily be in the forefront in a lot of these issues. And she will leave people to manage their ministries as they think fit. Mind you, that runs its own risk because she no longer would have control over it and she wouldn't micromanage and anything like that. But I really think that she's probably going to be looking now on as I'm going to be, well, like you said, the motherly type, mothering the members of cabinet and so on, but not necessarily holding their hands and not literally directing them as to where to go. That's my thing. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and of course, somebody made the point on the panel last night. I don't remember if it was you, Bishnu, about the young people who are going to be ministers, young and inexperienced, as opposed to the team before where you had a lot of experienced professionals and so on. That doesn't necessarily make them any better than the young people sometimes. But the fact is that they're I can't think about anybody in the young brigade who has had any ministerial experience of any significance. I mean, ministerial experience for the UNC was 10 years ago, before all of them got into political. How are they likely to govern? And all three of you can come in on this. Bishnu, Clyde, and Denise. Do you see the capacity of a cabinet consisting of these young persons? And I don't like to knock young people. I said something about young people recently, and my son responded very sharply, and I had to kind of back away from it. So I'm not knocking young people, as it were, but inexperience is perhaps a better
Yeah.
word.
Well, Tony, this morning I was in conversation with a person, and we were talking about the outcome, and I said, "Who you think will be the AG?" Which is in a sense the most critical position in a government beside the prime minister. And I'm saying, well, Anand Ramlogan was out of the campaign except they put him to talk for Roger Alexander in a meeting in one little place in Tunapuna. Is it Prakash Ramada? Other than him, the whole
No, Saddam.
all the 190 lawyers they had in the place yesterday, which of them, Saddam? Saddam gets up and he explains the law in Parliament. But I don't think he is somebody who is capable of being an attorney general. Is that why Jeremy went back on the platform? Was that an application? I don't know.
Well, that is the suggestion, that we might very well have a Jeremy coming back in as the Attorney General.
But if you recall, Vishnu, when Jeremy was last Attorney General, it is the UNC through Lawrence Moraj, who came to the Law Association to bring a motion of no confidence in him.
Yes.
Politics, any number could play in these.
So the thing is, Tony, the younger people, some of them, well, certainly I think Ramnarayan will be energy. And he thinks he knows a lot about energy. But the Surinamis...
He wasn't too brilliant, actually.
Yes. But the Surinamis have just this week published that they are talking with the Chinese about setting up an offshore gas facility in terms of processing. Suddenly I saw yesterday that the Guyanese talking about, well, we might send gas to Trinidad. And there's some link between that government and the one we have in from today. So I don't think that there are people in there who have not been the ambitious type for the last decade trying to get positions. So outside of ambition, I don't know that there's any ideological position that they hold that talks about, everybody wins. Fine. Okay, how do they win? For 10 years, we practicing hamper politics, and that's what we have made our habit. So getting into office will simply be a continuation of that. I don't see them accomplishing very much in terms of advancing Trinidad and Tobago, except hoping to survive 5 years.
Yeah. I have the economic diversification for me is a big, big, big thing. It's something that we have struggled with in the Caribbean in the post-colonial period. And I think about, I don't know if there are economists, I don't know them too well, so maybe there are a few or people that can be called upon who have had some kind of association with the party. And that to me is a frightening kind of thing, that you're going to put something that has not been catered for by, series of governments over decades into the hands of some young economists. Has anybody heard or seen an economist who is with the party? I'm not talking about somebody from outside who may have some kind of association with them. Anybody knows of that kind of person?
No, I haven't seen any of that. But my comment or my opinion on this is that young people transform organizations, and we've seen that happen. And oftentimes they're able to transform organizations because they've had some kind of mentorship. And to me, and I know that people will kind of stoop and say, well, stupidness you're talking. But to me, there's an opportunity here with a prime minister who is fragile, a lot of young people coming in. There's an opportunity here to establish some kind of mentorship, private mentorship, so that people can then work through how do they become a minister? How do they become maybe a permanent secretary in a particular ministry? What do they do? How do they do it? So that to me, what is needed is for the UNC to create some kind of strategy to help the young people implement things. And if you don't do that, then we're not going to get anywhere. But I am optimistic that this change is going to make a difference. And one of the other reasons I'm optimistic about that is that I would certainly encourage our population to march whenever there's an issue that they think is wrong, that they think is not being done. Come out and protest. Now, protesting has a lot of risk in it, but you have to communicate to the government what is it that you find are important. And if I was the prime minister in a fragile state, I would be asking myself, so what is going to be my legacy? It can't just be that I won the election. My legacy could be all of those laws that we say we need 2/3 in order to pass. You now have an opportunity to do it. So certainly you should be able to come out there and do those. Issues of the implementation, which is our biggest problem. We do not implement our laws. The transformation of that, how do we do that? Get some people around, get some of the young people, get some people who are not necessarily in the politics, but who have the competence to come up with what is the strategy we can implement. So I am just basically saying that this requires management. And in order for you to put management in there, they have to have a mission, they have to have a vision, they have to have a strategy, and they have to know what action they're going to take. It doesn't just happen. Your strategy to action is the critical point that I think we need to implement. And I sincerely hope that somebody listening and they will tell the Prime Minister, that's what I say.
Gentlemen, the difference between...
and Elon Musk.
Gentlemen, the difference between us cynical men and Denise, hopeful for the future, the mother looking towards optimism and so on and so on, it's marked. That difference is quite marked. Denise, thank you for your, I'm not telling you to leave, but I'm thanking you for your optimism that you've brought to our discussion. My friend, yes, Bishnu, the holding this thing together and making it something of a success in all of the challenges that are ahead.
Well, I think I really believe that what the UNC is probably going to be doing is simply trying to bring in people, experts in their own right, to probably take positions to head key ministries, and then using some of their MPs as junior ministers so that at least they could learn the ropes if they don't have any ministerial experience. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the people who they would be bringing in would have ministerial experience, but they would be technocrats more. I think that is what they may be looking at. Whether or not they actually bring them in, but of course, I know now understanding the politics, having a victory like they did last night, there'll be so many people knocking on the doors, begging to come in and saying, give me anything. right? Make me a minister, make me a senator, and I could do this and I could do that. Whether or not the UNC thought about some of these things before, I really don't know. I'm hoping that the fact that they took so long in selecting their candidates, they would have, when supposedly they said they screened, 200 plus people, and they promised them that they will all have a place for them, notwithstanding that they did not get selected as a candidate. I don't know, amongst those people who were screened and were not selected, whether any one of them would get would be called upon to serve. And those are the kinds of things. But I hear you with regard to the challenge in holding this government together, because somebody really has to take charge. Now, again, this is why, for instance, when I said earlier that I think that I am not sure that the Prime Minister will be taking full control, because I think she would be probably putting a lot of and this is my own, again, personal opinion. I think from what I have seen in the run up to the election, in the campaign, that there might be a lot more emphasis being placed on a person like a Jillian John, for instance, to guide people to manage certain things and to take it forward. I mean, of course, there's always a Rudal Munilal, but when you look at the deputy leaders in the party, I mean, apart from Jillian John and Rudal Munilal, yes, you have David Lee as another deputy, but I don't see him as this masterful minister. And I know that Clyde would have suggested that Kevin might have come in as the Minister of Energy, but I mean, in the rumor mill, for instance, people were always saying that David Lee always believed that he knows energy better than Ram Narayan. Whether that is so or not, I don't know. But I mean, I have heard that being said, that he wants energy. So those are the kinds of things you now have to look at, and how Kamala Prasad deals with those kinds of challenges. And I mean, all these people knocking on the door, I don't know who is making the decisions, but I think she's going to go back to some of those traditional people, Tim Gopi Singh to advise her, probably even Jack Warner, and even Sadiq Bash to some extent. But I am not sure who else she'll go to and take advice from.
And of course, there will be expectations of all kinds of people for positions, both those who have been elected and those who are outside on the fringes of the party and who may have been working with the party over the period of time. And of course, when people don't get the kinds of things that they expect, there can be difficulties in all of that. So we are talking here with three of our panelists who were on last week, Bishnu, Raggonath, Clyde Weatherhead, and Denise Demming, reflecting on the victory of the United National Congress last night in the general election and what is likely to happen going forward. Recognizing too, and I think there is a full agreement on it, that we're not talking about a serious coalition with ground plans and structure and so on, but rather on what Lloyd Bess used to call a pickup side of people playing Sunday morning cricket and football in the savannah. Folks, let's wind up now by...
Tony, before you wind up, I have another question.
Yes, boss.
Sorry to be interjected me so much. And I would ask Dr. Raggonath this, the fact that the UNC has talked about proportional representation in the past, and I think they would have basically, if it was there, would have been the main beneficiaries of that over the years, and also constitutional reform. Now that they have the numbers, do you expect them to bring those things back to the table again in a significant way?
Okay, so let me deal with it. They don't have the numbers for constitutional reform per se. They need 3/4, and we haven't reached there yet. Or they haven't reached there yet. as to things
Can
that
they do a, sorry, Bishnu, can they do a pandy in the circumstances? Remember Larson Griffith?
well, all of that is possible, eh? But they will have to get at least 2 more people on their side. And this is not counting
Maybe the Tobago.
no. This is not counting the Tobago. Even if they get the Tobago, they'll still need at least 1 more person or 2,
Okay.
right? So they don't have that 3/4. They have the 2/3 majority, but not the 3/4. As to the constitution, as to the issue of proportional representation, the way I put it is that the bigger parties don't really want proportional representation. It's the smaller parties want a voice in, so they say, let us have proportional representation. And while they are while parties are in government, they say nothing more. So in fact, I mean, if I may go back to the beginning of the program when you talk about the Commonwealth observers and you talk about campaign financing legislation and so on, and I said in 2016 we had this 2-day seminar conference at the Hyatt, and then nothing happened. Because really and truly, while you are in government, you don't really want to change anything that will impact your future presence in the government. Proportional representation is one of those things that I always warn people about. We hear it all the time, and it's a nice thing to talk about. But we have to also understand that proportional representation doesn't necessarily change anything in terms of how things are happening. Let me just explain that. If a party wins 40% of the vote, and another party wins 30% of the vote, under the PR model, we'll say, okay, fine. They will have to find, you'll have 30% and 40%, and of course there'll be another 30%. And that'll be good. Whether they could work together is another issue. And that's where we go to a theory called consociational democracy. But we are reaching there yet. But when you talk about proportional representation, bear in mind, let us use Guyana as a case, proportional representation. They have proportional representation. But whoever is in government still controls the purse. And whoever is in opposition is still suffering in opposition the same way our opposition suffers, right? So it doesn't really change anything per se, except to say that you are given smaller voices, smaller people a voice in the parliament. But whether they will actually be able to make a difference, not necessarily.
Of course, we all know of the stand by Dr. Williams way back when about PR. What's the phrase? It's a dagger to the heart of the People's National Movement. So don't expect any support from the PNM in that regard. Clyde.
But Tony, one thing that came out of this outcome is this, that the UNC has the 2/3. It's the first time since 2010 that the electorate is giving a party that possibility. And as I said today to some people, 2/3 majority or any special majority for a government is a two-edged sword. Because some of the things that the PNM kept complaining we can't do without the opposition, the UNC can do. And we have to be very careful about that. And I hear Denise saying, well, people have to be prepared to protest. I think probably the only thing the UNC learned from 2010 to 15 or beyond, well, at that time, is that the PNM was a constant opposition outside the parliament for the 5 years. And the UN and Kamala made the point on the platform last night or recently that we held on to the Monday night, and I think Cook Mayhew repeated it last night.
Yes.
That every Monday night, this day, 2-3 times a week, we talking to the population. So what they learned from the PNM is that you have to fight down the government for the whole term so you could possibly win the next time. Now, it is significant that Stuart Young only comment last night is, we will fight in the opposition, right? So it is known that the PNM is also going to go back to that strategy, which means the UNC is going to become very defensive. And that is going to be a recipe. I think, Denise, with all due respect, that your great hopes for for collaboration and coalition and stuff is going to evaporate very soon.
Like,
The
you're
other
too
thing is, to
cynical.
me,
That's a man thing, man. You're too cynical. What's
no,
wrong?
no. I'm
Behave
realistic.
yourself.
I've been around long enough, Tony, and around these kind of things to know. And the other thing that I think is of significance, and Fali Augustine better understand what he has in his hands. Those 2 seats in Tobago is not merely to go and give to the UNC. Tobago has made a statement about Tobago in the context of Trinidad and Tobago. And if they play it wrong, well, next year is THA election again.
Yeah, in February or March.
Right. So if they play it wrong for the next few months, they're also going to be out at that level too. So the point is, I think it gives them an opportunity within the national politics. I don't know the capabilities of the 2 people who are going to be in the parliament to present the Tobago case. And, but it is a delicate position that the TPP has ended up in. Duke is finished. He couldn't even get 400 votes this round. And he employed a strategy that in the PSA kept him in office, where you had 5 and 6 teams fighting him. All you had to do was get a small number of votes, and he was in office perpetually. In Tobago, you end up with 9 and 5 going up, 8 and 4 going up against the PNM, which should have given them a victory.
Yeah.
But it means that in Tobago, there's a sentiment about going forward with autonomy that I don't think the UNC even understands what that issue is.
Yeah. And of course, they must also, this is Farley, must also take the history into account. And remember, Mr. Robinson and Pamela Nicholson, two political heavyweights. And the treatment that they got from Basdeo Pandey after they made an association. And I like the word association instead of coalition, because coalition is a different story. Folks, I want to thank you very much for being with us again. Clyde Weatherhead, Denise Demming, and Bishnu Raggonath talking with us. And Chalo also entered the fray this evening as a political discussant. Right, Chalo?
Yes, indeed.
Right. So thank you very much. Tomorrow I have the recording of the CARICOM and the Commonwealth Observers, and we're going to add some people to it as we play the recording of it. Thanks again, folks, and keep listening. I have sent you all the link for the station, so make sure that you listen to the station, because not only when you're on the program, right?
Okay.
And Chalo,
I do, Tony, off and on.
Chalo, when you're going to rerun this program?
Most likely in the morning. Yeah, we'll probably do it in the morning, just after 8 o'clock, somewhere in that area.
Okay. All right, folks, so that you know when to listen, and don't depend on me, because I gave Clyde about 5 different times last week.
Yeah.
Okay, but we'll listen tomorrow. And I want to thank both Clyde and Bishnu for the supporting and for having a wonderful conversation with you all. I mean, we disagree, but I am very happy to have had the conversation. And thank you very much, Tony.
And we thank you for your female, motherly, sisterly, whatever presence.
Just have one before I go. If I may just say, Denise talked about coalition and coming together. And my only concern, a few years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we wanted the government and the opposition to meet to come up with a crime plan. I am hoping that now that we have a different prime minister and a different opposition leader, they actually come together and come up with a crime plan. That's
And
what
we, have, and we have a big policeman who is going to be Minister of
Move
National
on.
Security.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Take care.
Bye.
I
Bye-bye.
Your vote will decide our destiny. Your vote will decide what you want to be. Your vote can foretell our country's fate. Move and use it well before it's too late. If it is that who you're voting, fail beyond a doubt. When you're voting, vote them out. Vote them out. If it is they prove it to be only full amount. When you're voting, vote them out. Vote them out. If it is the time is now that change should come about. Just as how you vote them in, vote them out. Register and vote them out. If they